If I were to tell you that people steal my lines constantly, that probably wouldn't surprise you. What does surprise me, though, is how badly and out of place people steal my lines. For example, maybe I'll say something that's really contextual, it makes sense in this one particular situation, and then like 6 months later, a year later, I'll hear someone saying it as like their standard thing, right? I remember one example. Once upon a time I put out, I don't know the exact wording or whatever, but I put out a piece of infield footage where I basically had to dodge around like several different obstacles to talk to a girl, and then I eventually was like, wow, I've never burned that many calories to say hi to a girl before. And then I met a guy, and I was breaking down his infield, and his standard opener was to walk up to a girl and be like, I've never had to burn this many calories to say hi to a girl before. When the girl's standing there and he just walked up to her, and it doesn't make any sense. And the guy looks over at me proudly after seeing that on screen and goes, I got that from you. Like, you did not get that from me. This is bullshit. That's not how that line was meant to be used. So, in this video, I'm going to give you a bunch of my lines. And in fact, I'm going to give you some of the most important contextual lines that I can. But I want you to understand the context more than I want you to understand the lines. I want you to understand the purpose behind them so that you can create your own even more than the particular lines. All right, so I'm going to get into that first, and then I'm going to give you the actual lines that I use. And specifically, I want to teach you how to handle one of the biggest obstacles that I think everybody has in their game. Like 95% of people don't know how to escalate properly. They don't know how to take a platonic conversation and make it sexual. Okay? And that's what I'm going to show you my lines for. Now the idea here, this list I'm going to give you in a minute, it's a series of lines, and they start with incredibly innocuous, incredibly safe lines that aren't really saying much of anything. They're just tiny little shows of interest. And then they go all the way up to things that are very, very blatantly, very overtly sexual, things you wouldn't say without, you know, some positive context before, and things that are a risk and could get you a rejection, all right? So that's point one, is that there is a progression. You want to use these in an order. These aren't just used randomly. I want to repeat that again. You're not just using them randomly. I see so many guys, they hear a line from some pickup coach, and they just use it randomly. No, there is a context to everything, and in this case, there's a progression and a sequence to it. So that's the first thing I want to point out. Second thing I want to point out is that every single line on this list has some form of like push-pull to it. There's no line where I'm just like, I hate you. And there's no line where I'm just like, I love you, okay? Everything has a little bit of both. So this is how you escalate without giving your power away. This is how you move things forward without being an obvious foregone conclusion, without being boring, without being too easy for the girl, all right? So those are the two things to note. Number one, there's this progression. Number two, there's a push-pull nature to every single line, all right? So without further ado, I'm going to go through the lines, but I want you to understand the context even more so. Like this is a kind of video where if I were to cut it off right now and say, make this list of lines yourself, you should be able to go make that list of lines yourself. Make a series of push-pull lines and make it start very innocuous and then go very heavy. In fact, if you wanted to like really do your homework, like go do your homework and make that list yourself and then come back to this video if you really want to, okay? Because the exercise of creating it is actually even more valuable than the video. However, I am going to give you my lines, so here they are in sequence. All right, first off we have, you seem, pause, interesting, right? That pause is important because that's actually where the push-pull is. And you'll notice this is so innocuous that it's not, you could say this to your friend, you could say this to another man, you could say it to your boss, right? It's not necessarily man to woman, but it does show a personal relationship. Next, you have the silliest, funniest, most adorable expressions. Now this is a clear compliment, but at the same time it's a silly compliment, so that's where the push-pull is. Your trouble is actually a negative, but it's a negative that has kind of sexual connotation, and it gives someone sort of influence and makes them seem sort of interesting. You're actually kind of cute. It's the actually and kinda that are the push-pull as opposed to you're cute. You're actually kind of cute. It leaves a lot of room for doubt. It leaves a lot of room for the girl to not know exactly what you mean, to fill in the blanks herself, that kind of stuff. You're actually pretty okay. I didn't expect to like you at first. Now you're overtly putting the push-pull into it, and you're indicating like a progressing relationship. This one's actually really, really good to use when you're going to like qualifying a girl, letting her win you over. Stop looking at me like that, right? And again, this is meant in like kind of a sexual way. I'm going to pretend you didn't just say that. I'm pretend you didn't just say that because I'm enjoying liking you. Okay. Now again, it's like I was liking you, but you're messing it up. Now notice the difference between this and you seem interesting, right? I'm enjoying liking you. I'm pretending you didn't say that. It's a much harsher statement, and it's also much more. I'm enjoying liking you. You're overtly saying I like you, as opposed to you seem interesting. You're not necessarily saying much of anything. So you'll notice how much more risk you're taking and also how much more blatantly you're showing interest. Now we're going to really show interest. You'll never get into my pants if you keep doing that, right? This idea that she's chasing you is the push-pull, but you are overtly bringing up sex. Damn, please stop being so cute, right? You're cute, but it's a problem, so there's tension in the statement. I'm not going to sleep with you tonight, right? Again, overtly bringing it up, overtly putting it on the table, but saying it in the negative, which is the push-pull. But notice again the progression. We've gone from you seem, pause, interesting, to I'm not going to sleep with you tonight. How much more sexual has it gotten? I'm sorry, can you repeat that? I was too busy objectifying you to listen, right? It's disrespectful because you're not paying attention, but it's very sexual because you are objectifying and thinking of them in that light. But see, it's very offensive, right? So you wouldn't want to start off with this. You need to gradually build up to it, and if the responses are good along the way, you can eventually get there. You'd make such a great wife, girlfriend, or fuck buddy if you weren't so whatever, cute, pushy, pick whatever adjective you like. Now we're getting overtly sexual, as in we're talking about consequences of sex and things that go on around sex, but now we're going to actually make it more subtle. So I kind of want to have breakfast with you. I kind of want to make you my New York or my Vegas or my LA. This one's a nice little one in bringing up comfort and sexualizing it. I have to ask you something, and this is really important. Do you sleep on the right or left side of the bed? Right? A little bit of a risky thing to say if it were early in the conversation, but once you've talked about it and there's intimacy in the conversation, definitely very sexual. I'm trying so hard not to do something naughty to you right now, and then we end up with the very comical "I want you inside me," which would be very sexual from a girl to a guy, but doesn't even make sense from a guy to a girl, which is where the push-pull and where the humor is. So looking at this list, first of all, I want to say, if you go through your game and never use one of these lines, that's totally fine, all right? These are just lines that me and some people I was working with just came up with, kind of just throwing, spitballing ideas, saying some things we'd said before that we thought were funny and interesting and that we'd had work for us, okay? But none of these specific lines is where the magic is. They're good lines, and they all have the right format, which is a push-pull and that progressive nature. Come up with your own lines. Come up with the things you've said that worked before, but the real lesson is push-pull and the progressive nature of going from very innocuous to very, very overt, very sexual, very risky, right? And the idea here is if you were to say the very risky thing at the start, it wouldn't work very well because it's too much. It's uncalibrated. Even if the girl liked you from the start, it's uncalibrated. But if you start with the very innocuous and you gradually build up to the more and more and more risky things, you'll progress very, very nicely and very, very smoothly. And most guys, what they're missing is that progression, right? Most guys either never show any interest. This is the level of interest, 0 over time, staying at 0. Or what they do is they just show all the interest at once right at the start, and it's very off-putting. What you want is just a gradual ramping up of interest, right? I guess from your perspective, graphs go this way, gradual ramping up of interest. But in any case, you get the idea of what you're trying to do, okay? So let this be a metaphor for you. Let this be a template. Also, you can steal my lines. I'll post a link where you can actually access these lines for download if you want a written copy of all of them to go through. But again, I don't want you to be the person I talked about at the start who blindly uses my lines out of context and just thinks, oh, because Todd said it, it's good. It's only good in the right context. So the context matters more than the lines.